Hi everybody, welcome back to the PTC podcast. I'm here today with Caroline Leon. Hello Caroline.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
It's been a while. This is your second appearance.
It is.
If you remember, the first one was quite a while ago. We're on 60 something episodes. I would say you're in the first 10 episodes, way back. 2016 or 17?
Oh wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, maybe earlier. Back then you were talking a little bit about your accident.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to, with that said, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself, whichever way you like to give your intro? Tell everyone who you are and what you're doing.
I thought this was your job, Keith. You were meant to introduce me.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, Caroline had an accident. People don't want to hear me talk.
I know.
Caroline had a rock climbing accident 2015 or 16, and then we met through rehab training. And what was it? What was the you broke your feet, you broke your pelvis, you broke your back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So new spine, new hips, new feet.
All metal,
Yeah.
bionic.
And then learned to walk, hydrotherapy, all that stuff. Then came to me, long time ago, and now you are a mountain climber.
Yeah, I have no idea how that happened.
When do you think it happened? When do you think you made the switch?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. It was just a really gradual progression into doing something that felt right for me at the time. And I think it's hard to understand if you haven't been through something extremely traumatic and life-altering, like a ginormous accident that puts you in a wheelchair for 2 years. But when you do start to come out of it, it's really like, particularly for me, it was about reshaping my life, and I didn't know how to do that at the time. And walking was kind of something that felt right, and I have no idea how the mountaineering thing came into being, but I do remember having this idea that I wanted to go and climb all the mountains in the Middle East. And the more that I sat with it, the more that it actually, like, it woke me up and it made me come alive. And it was kind of this really gradual process of, like, starting to come alive. And I just kept doing the things that made me feel alive. And at the time, it was being in the mountains and being in nature. And I loved the experience of traveling and the experience of, like, being able just to be in these crazy wild places and in the wilderness and so remote and so, like, out of left field of what anybody was doing at the time. And it just made me really come alive, and the mountains were a part of that.
Had you done any mountain climbing before your accident?
Yeah, so I had climbed Machu Picchu and Kilimanjaro. And so I'd done those quite a few years earlier, and at the time I was quite involved with Golf for Good before I had my accident. And I was doing a lot of adventures for them and hiking and stuff like that, but nothing as serious as it's kind of turned into at the moment. It really reshaped my life.
How was your first experience of Kilimanjaro?
To be honest with you, so we did the Marengo route, and the group was amazing. I actually bought a photograph of Kilimanjaro, and I got everybody in our team to sign it. It was with Golf for Good in 2012, and the experience was so beautiful that it really imprinted something into me. And I had such a beautiful experience. It's on my wall, this picture, with all these signatures from our team on the back. It was amazing. It was very hard. And I remember it being so cold. I didn't have the right gear, so when I was on the summit, I was freezing. And I couldn't wait to get off the summit. But I remember we got there just before sunrise, and we'd done the Marengo route, so we had to do Gilman's Point and then traverse walk around the crater. And we got there just as the sun was rising, and it was freezing. But yeah, it was a good feeling. It was a very good feeling.
How many times have you summited Kili now?
God, I don't know. I think it's probably 5, maybe 6, and maybe 5.
Has it got just easier and easier, or is it different each time?
It's definitely different, which is unusual because you think that it would be the same experience over and over again, but it's different. And I think what's happened is that now that I go there quite a lot, it's definitely a lot easier. And now I see other people struggling and finding it really hard, and I'm just like, oh, okay. I remember that used to be me.
Do you think that's a mental thing that you know what to expect, and like, or do you think it's you are just much more fitter and a better mountaineer now at this stage?
Oh, I'm definitely not fitter. Like before my accident, I was in much better shape. It's more that I know what's coming and that I know what to do when all the peaks and troughs come. I know how to handle like when I'm not feeling great, or handle when you start sleepwalking, or when you feel low energy, or when your mind starts to waver. I understand the techniques and the strategies to do and to implement really quickly, so that I don't fall into a slump.
So what do you mean sleepwalking?
Like, so for example, on lots of mountains, you barely sleep as you get higher up in altitude, and you sleep so sparingly and so badly that when you gets to summit night and you leave at midnight or 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning and you head to the summit, after 6 or 7 or 8 hours, there are moments where your eyes are just closing for a minute and you're like, oh, just 1 second. I'll just close them for 1 second and I'll walk. And it's so dangerous and not advisable.
Not advisable. The guys were saying that. I remember when we did Kili the first year, when I think that was it was post-lockdown, so it was 2021. But yeah, the guys came back off the summit and we're all talking about how they were just nodding off on the sleep, and I was the complete opposite. I was so wired and so wide awake and so like amped up. I think I went the other way. I burned off too much energy, just being too let's go.
The adrenaline.
Yeah, the adrenaline. Because I really thought the first time that we went, the first summit night was such a memorable experience. Just those few minutes before you move. So you're outside the tent, everyone's got their headlights on, everyone's like wide-eyed and nervous looking at each other. And you just have to you just know you're going up, and when you look up, you just complete darkness, and there's maybe a few lights or whatever really far away. They're just like tiny stars together. And then you just start marching into the darkness. I thought that was super cool. So that, the whole time for me, was just what I was thinking about. But everyone else was like, no, I've just fallen asleep on my poles. So we did that 2021. That was your first, because it was your expedition. It must have been the first attempt at your 7 summits.
Yeah.
That you had to postpone.
Yeah.
Because we decided, me, you, and Taz were on the beach. We decided we'd take a trip and go with you. And then that sort of opened the floodgate for everything that we've had since.
Yeah.
Because people loved it so much. I mean, we came back, people were so interested in going, and it was so much in line with what we want to do, is get people doing bigger and better things than just getting in on the scales all the time. So going back to the first question, you don't really know when you made the switch from...
I know the period. It was around 2019. And it was around that time that I was trying to learn how to walk properly, because I had a very pronounced Trendelenburg gait. And so it used to really annoy me when people used to ask me, like, what's wrong with your leg? And I still get it sometimes, and it still really like angers me, because I'm like, shit, it's still there. But it used to be very pronounced that I couldn't hide it. And now normally if I concentrate a lot, I can hide it. So I have to think a lot. But at the time, what I didn't realize is that actually when you damage nerves, they take so long to heal. It's such a slow process of waking a nerve up and waking up an area of your body. And my leg had essentially just, because it, so to speak, it detached from the other part of my body. Like my pelvis broke in such a way that my right pelvis was not connected to the rest of my body via bone. And it did something to the nerves of my leg that just made them just dead. So they wouldn't work or function, or like I could move my leg, but it just couldn't move normally because something was wrong, and I still haven't worked out exactly what it was. But there are certain movements that are just not easy. And I've lost my train of thought. Please
Well, I remember when we were training that there was like one whole section of movement where your leg would just switch off and go limp.
Oh yeah, so it still has sections that it does that,
Yeah.
and sections where it's still a lot weaker. So you asked me when I
Yeah, you're talking about your
decided-
limp. You're talking
yeah.
about the limp that you had.
And I wanted to get rid of that. And what I read was that in order to make something better, you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. So I started walking a lot, and I remember, I think I've told this story many times. My friend had done a Guinness World Record. They had gotten a quad bike and gone all around Africa and Europe. And when I went to Australia and I was still limping really badly, he's my best friend. I love him dearly. He suggested that we go climb Mount Kosciuszko in Australia. So it's one of the 7 summits, but the Baz version. And we went and we climbed it. We got to the top, and it was the most exhilarating feeling I remember, even though I was limping all the way there. And on the way back, when we started coming down, I just couldn't walk anymore. And I remember like bursting into tears, and he had to piggyback me, and then we had to get the park rangers to come and get us.
How high is the mountain?
It's not very high. It's 2,200 meters. So it takes about 6 or 7 hours to hike up.
So like from the car park.
Yeah, from the car park. So you can do it in a day.
Yeah.
But it's still, 6 or 7 hours is a long walk for someone who's just
Limping.
learned how to walk. Yeah. And limping, and, my feet were still swelling like pineapples. So when we came down, it made me feel alive, and it made me feel amazing. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to do more of the things that make me feel really good. And it's around that time where I was like, okay, I'm going to go climb all the mountains in the Middle East, in part because they were so little and easy. And I thought that they were doable, even though there were 2 really big ones in there, like Mount Ararat and Mount Damavand. They're still quite high.
Not only the height of the mountains aside, there's loads of them when you do all of the mountains of the Middle East. And then a lot of them are in war zones.
Yeah.
So it's not. So it's almost the mountain is the easiest part, and once you're there,
totally,
it's just the easiest bit is to keep walking. But the rest of it is quite the challenge.
Oh, completely. Like in Iraq, you're walking past like a landmine infested zone.
So briefly go through it then, just like you did. First one was Turkey.
Mm-hmm. So basically I was doing a version of the Middle East that included the Turkey and Egypt and the Arabian Peninsula. And I can't remember, there's certain geographical explanations of the Middle East. It's either the Arab world, it's a geopolitical, it's a political only, or a religious only. And I chose one of the 3 variations and did that variation. So I went to Turkey to climb Mount Ararat, and from memory, I think that's 5,400. It's a snow-capped mountain, really cold at the top, very beautiful. But again, it's in a very remote area, an area of Turkey that's politically very unstable, has a lot of issues. The mountain had been closed for several years. They weren't issuing permits. So I actually went in there illegally. I found a local guide that was happy to take me, and kind of like snuck my way into the mountain without a proper permit or anything. It was very, very sketchy. But when I got there, I realized that there were quite a few people there, quite a lot of Iranians and Turkish people that just climb the mountain anyway because it's not properly managed. So it didn't matter in the end if you had a permit or not. Then I went to Iran straight afterwards and climbed Mount Damavand the first time. I've also been to that country many times. And then I went to, I think it was Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Iraq. So then ended up going around the rest of the Middle East, climbing the mountains, and progressively they got smaller and smaller until I got to the UAE, Oman, and obviously Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain. They're all like little baby hills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then, some of us joined you for the UAE one, whatever date that was that year. So from there then, that was, I'm just thinking about the timeline. Then So
I
you'd
did
already,
that in a month. So it would have been October.
so that was all 1 month.
Yeah, so I started on the 1st of September and finished roughly 30 days later.
So by that time, you'd already done 2 of the 7 summits, Killy and the Australian one.
Yeah.
So what's the Baz you were telling me?
So there's two versions of the 7 summits. One is a Baz version. It's called the Baz version, and the other one I can't remember the name for it. But basically, one includes Carsten's Pyramid, and the other one includes Kosciuszko, and it's just a debate about, is it the oceanic plate or the Australian plate? Because technically the Carsten's Pyramid is in Indonesia and that's in Asia. And so technically Kosciuszko is the highest in like
Australia.
its own continent. Yeah.
So from that one, you've done Killy, Kosciuszko. What other ones from that list? What other mountains on the 7 summits?
So it is the normal 7 summits. It's just the difference is Kosciuszko. So it's Everest, Killy, Elbrus, Carstens or Kosciuszko, Denali, Vinson, and I think that's it. That's 7.
And Vinson is the one in Antarctica. So you've done the 7 summits. Or the Volcanic Seven Summits.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
Which is different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Killy, Elbrus.
Are you asking me what the Volcanic 7 Summits are? So the Volcanic 7 Summits are the highest volcano in each of the 7 continents, and it's very similar to the 7 summits, except you climb the highest volcano rather than the highest mountain, and in some places they overlap. So it is Mount Elbrus in Russia, which is the Europe's highest volcano and mountain, Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, which is the highest volcano or mountain in Africa, Pico de Orizaba in Mexico, which is the highest volcano in North America, Ojos de Salado in South America, Mount Sidley in Antarctica, and Mount Kilauea in Papua New Guinea.
So what's Antarctica like?
Antarctica's beautiful. It's very beautiful. It's very cold. It's very beautiful. It's like being on another planet. It's just very picturesque and snow and blue ice everywhere, and you have to really think about certain things, like when you can't just go outside without proper clothes. Like you need to make sure that you're wearing enough because the weather can change really quickly, but other than that, it's very beautiful.
How many days was that whole expedition?
In Antarctica, it's 10 days, 2 weeks roughly. Yeah.
And you're in the bottom of nowhere, and there's no nighttime or no daytime?
There's no... So you go in the summer, so there's no nighttime.
Yeah. There's no night, so it's all daytime.
Yeah.
What's that like, trying to sleep? Did that affect any of the... did you suffer from that? Do you notice anything different?
So I guess maybe what I'll say is that... So after obviously going to all the mountains in the Middle East, then I did the Volcanic 7 Summits. And so going to Antarctica was a part of that. And sleep-wise, it can be challenging to sleep, yeah. It can be very challenging just because it's always daylight, so you don't actually realize when it starts to get dark. So it could, and if you're not looking at your phone because there's no internet there, even though now I've heard that they've put internet there in Union Glacier Camp, but there's no internet, so you're not looking at your phone, so you have absolutely no concept of time because it's always daylight. So you might wake up at like 6 a.m. and then go have breakfast at 8, and then whilst you're waiting to go out to the mountain, you're kind of diddly daddling around camp, and you have no idea what time it is. You have to keep like having a look, like, oh, is it lunchtime? What time is it? And after dinner, you're just like, we were playing cards the whole time, so we had no idea. Look at the clock and it was 3 a.m.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how high is that mountain or the volcano?
The volcano is 4,400 meters, but it's almost, what's interesting about it is it gives you an idea of what like an 8,000 meter mountain would be like, not in terms of the altitude, but in terms of the conditions, because the conditions get so cold that it gives it that feel to it. So, for example, like my goggles completely like froze on the inside, so no matter how much I cleaned them, I couldn't get them to stop fogging up, and not just fogging up, but fogging up and freezing. And then you're using your breath to try and defog them, but then it just like freezes straight away. And things like how to protect your hands, like you can't have any part of your face exposed to the cold because you get like black spots immediately. And so it really gives you this idea of what those really high mountains would be like, in terms of it's the same temperature even though it's not the same altitude.
Yeah, and is it wind chill, or is it just no matter what it's freezing? Like
look, no matter what it's freezing, but then there's also wind, and the wind makes it really like very harsh. Even though we had really great weather, it was very cold. It was -30 on the summit, but a proper -30 without wind chill, and we had very little wind. So just naturally it's sitting at -30, whereas you go to other mountains and the temperature is like 10 or -10 or something along those lines, but then the wind chill makes it -30, whereas here it's like, oh no, it's actually just -30.
And do you feel any like residual pain or stiffness or whatever from your accident in your joints, in your feet, in your hip on these mountains?
Yeah, all the time. Like my body's adjusting all the time. So it's not like, for example, the problem that I have the most is probably my feet, and so they get really stiff. And if I haven't gotten used to walking like a big distance, like say for example, when we went to Everest Base Camp, like the distances are quite long, and I hadn't like been doing a lot of long distance training, and so when we went into that, then my feet were really sore and they get really stiff. And so there's always that, or always this thing that I'm adjusting to. So it's never constantly gone, but what's good is that it's always getting better, even though it's never away. Like for example, before, both my feet used to hurt all the time, and it was actually my left foot that used to hurt more. And now the pain in my left foot is completely gone, and my left foot doesn't cause me any problems. It's just in my right foot, and it's just in this one particular space. So it's overall, it's moving in the right direction, but just very slowly.
What is it now, nearly 10 years?
Yeah.
And the right leg the right foot took more. Did you have more surgeries, more like initial trauma in that?
Yeah, my right foot had, so my left foot had 2 surgeries, and my right foot I think had 7, so it had a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah.
7 or?
Yeah, significantly more anyway.
Yeah, 7 or 5, something along those lines.
Yeah.
It had more. And it just took more of a beating. Like my whole foot shattered, and then I had tendons that got stuck inside the bone when they adhered, so my foot's very different shape and structure, and it's very stiff, and it just moves and behaves really differently. But you're boring people with talking about my feet.
No, look, it's one of those things where we've had this chat a few times where it's like, look, you're obviously used to talking about it and you find it boring, but there's people who kind of need to be reminded of these things, that there's people who go through this kind of trauma and they don't let it bury them down, because I was listening to a podcast recently where the guy was saying how most people, by the time they get to 35, 40, that's them for the remainder of their life. They've got their habits, they've got their routines, they've got their personalities, and it usually takes some significant trauma. He said it's either trauma or some level of like a psychedelic out-of-body experience or an alien encounter. But it takes some level of severe trauma for them to change beyond a 35-year-old kind of human state. So I think the more people can listen to stories, you need to be reminded that like what people are going through everyone's got their own struggles, and some people need to kind of reframe where they're at with their own little strife and stress, and then be inspired by. And the only way they get to be inspired is by hearing the stories. Because you're up there on those mountains, you're not only are you trying to manage the typical things like fatigue, the cold, the altitude, you've also got to manage your feet and whatever else you've got hurting you and all those things. So one of the things I've heard you talk a lot about is, and obviously you're someone who has experienced it, so you're, pardon the pun, you're literally walking the walk, but it's the sort of post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth. Yeah. So do you want to just like, what does that mean to you?
I think to me personally, it's an interesting one. I haven't really thought about this in detail, so you're the first person that's asking me about this or spoken about it. So for me personally, after I had my accident, I almost felt like at somewhere along the line I was having a lot of very deep existential questions, and they included like, what am I doing with my life? What is my purpose? What am I meant to be doing? Like, why did I not die? I hear stories of people who, slip down the stairs and fall down and break their neck and die, or small little incidences and they lose their life. And here I had fallen like 7 to 12 meters, whatever it was, from a wall onto gravel. I had 14 surgeries and 23 blood transfusions, and I'm still here. I've had everything replaced. How the hell am I still alive? Like, that question used to sit so heavily on me because I felt like it was pushing me towards this looking for a purpose in life and looking for deeper meaning. And I realized that I couldn't find it on my own, because there was no real answer. There was no God that was sitting up there going, you've survived this because I want you to do this magical thing. Like, that's not how it happened at all, or that's not what transpired. But what it did made me realize is that I did have to find the deeper reasons for what I was doing in my life. And one of the things that I almost promised myself at the very beginning was, I did this to myself because I was stupid and foolish, and I owe it to myself to be better than I was when I started. And physically that hasn't manifested, because how can you ever be physically stronger or better than when you start? But there are many other ways to be better. And the road that I ended up going down was finding like a lot of plant medicine, using plant medicine as a vehicle to be able to discover the deeper meaning of things. And I did a lot of hypnotherapy and regression therapy, and it culminated to this point where I realized, okay, so we all have these episodes in our lives where something bad happens, whether somebody dies of cancer, or whether your loved one dies, or your friends die, or you lose your job, or someone betrays you, or you have a car accident, or we all have different ways that life tests us and we experience trauma. And it really is about what you do with that afterwards that either makes you grow or it makes you descend into some form of like depression or darkness or something along those lines. And at the time that I had my accident, I could see myself going down this perpetual path that was leading in a direction that was very, I won't say negative, but it was very dark. And when I started doing plant medicine, I realized that there was an ulterior path to that, but that I still had to go through the darkness to come out of it, to be able to do that. And it's a very confronting place to go through kind of this point of darkness all on your own, to find answers to things that you don't even know are there. And what ended up happening for me personally is that I realized that I wanted to grow, because it was very clear that if I didn't grow, this was going to be the defining point of my life. And I was either going to stay in a wheelchair forever, or I was going to have a life that is not what I wanted for myself. And I realized, okay, well, if I move in this direction and if I do everything in my power to bring the fragmented parts of me together into this whole place, that I could move beyond what had happened to me and grow from it. And it's interesting because to this day I still feel like my accident was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, in a very bizarre, weird way, because it pushed me into those very deep and dark places that, you know, I ended up growing from. And later on, obviously, I did a lot of regression therapy and hypnotherapy and a lot of normal cognitive therapy and a lot of plant medicine. And somehow it led me into this place where I started doing a master's in transpersonal psychology. And once I got there, I started to realize the science of it. There's actually studied science to this, and it is called post-traumatic growth or post-traumatic stress. And so people have incidences in their lives, like trauma or something that happens, and you either descend or you grow. And it's, people study it all the time when people survive, say, an avalanche on a mountain, or they survive these very, very traumatic experiences, like coming back from war, or, you know, getting divorced or something along those lines. And it either makes you grow, it makes you go down.
It's interesting because there's parallels. Like, obviously everybody's trauma and their story is a bit different, but for the people who sort of make it to the TED Talks, or they make it to the documentaries or whatever, that you often hear the phrase or the term, like, I made a decision to not fall down, whatever, succumb to this, or I made a decision to not die, I made a decision to live. It's like they flipped the switch in their head, and the passive non-action was going to take them to a point where they were going to disintegrate if they just stayed, if they didn't make that decision.
Well, what's really interesting is that if you imagine like two people standing on the top of a mountain, right? I'm using this analogy because it's easy, but it's also very, like, metaphorical. You can snowball down and just let that action propagate this downward direction. And you're right, it is no action, but it's also the easier path. Or you can continue to push something upwards, and the pushing upwards is the work that you put into it, into getting out of that, because it really takes so much sustained effort. You have to be so conscious of what you're doing and what you're saying and what you're doing to yourself and what you're saying to yourself and what you're doing to other people. And it's about so much self-reflection, but then also starting to see what that does to other people around you. And so it takes so much effort. And I think that's why a lot of people don't choose it, because to stay in this moment, like, for example, a lot of research says that post-traumatic stress disorder has a lot to do with, like, mental toughness and how your mind is thinking. And if you ruminate on issues, or if you stay focused on problems, those things can propagate that downward spiral. Whereas, say, if we're taking that analogy of pushing a ball up a mountain, to make that decision is to go, okay, I'm going to push the ball up the mountain, but then I constantly have to work to keep moving in that direction. And eventually it is the easier path because your life gets better. But it is strategies like, you know, mental tough strategies, which are not focusing on problems, but focusing on solutions, and moving away from the brooding or the ruminations, and moving to a place of action that reorientates your thinking. So there's a lot of mental strategies that either push you in one direction or the other. Unfortunately, we're not really taught any of these things. No one ever teaches you how to do them. You either inherently have them or you learn them from other people or from books or things like that. For me, what I found really powerful was that there was no way that I wasn't going to start moving or walking in that direction. And like you're right, I made a decision to do that, but then I actually had to fully walk it, because if you don't fully walk it, you don't really heal. And that was obviously my ultimate goal, was not to do anything else, but just to change myself, because I owed it to myself, right? Well, that's how I felt anyway. I owed it to myself to, look, I made this mistake and I really fucked up, and I owe it to myself to try and push out of it. And in the end, it worked out for the best.
Yeah, I mean, but so I totally get what you're saying, because it is that same thing. People decide, or like no action, the no-go is just going to take you down a different pathway. But then there's people who, and this is kind of like where my experience overlaps some of what you've been through, is just helping people and dealing with people who are hurt and injured, and some are simple, some are complex, and whatever, from the previous work I've done. Some people just want to get to a stage level 3 out of 10, because level 3 is they get to move around their house pain-free, they get to whatever, they get to sleep, they get to do all the basic things. Some people want to get to 5, where they're, still doing the things that they used to do. And then some people want to push on, and like you mentioned, you want to be better than you were before. Firstly, as we get older, we all go downhill. So like there's that aspect.
I don't agree with that. I think if you're looking at it in a classical perspective, yes. If you're only thinking in a one-dimensional sphere, that's physicality.
Yes,
but
that was what I was referring to.
Yes,
physically.
But if you change that sphere and you start to look at, oh well, there's this sense of wisdom and compassion and understanding and empathy and like deep value. There are so many other elements that actually, it's like a good wine, they mature. And I don't think those things get or decline, is my point.
Yeah, I'll sure grant you that. What I was actually speaking one-dimensionally about the physical. We slow down, we fatigue out earlier, all those things in general, broadly speaking, as we get older.
I think we change is not like, look, things definitely change, but I think it's the change that propagates things to re-steer their lives, rather than like, oh, I'm going to be a professional football player up until my 80s. Like,
yeah.
Of course, there's a lifespan for that. But I think people change and want different things, and obviously the physicality part is a facet of that. Anyway.
Oh, no, yeah, look, you can also change for the better, because your mindset might want you to go and in your 20s party a lot, stay up, and you just, you don't really take care of yourself. But then when you get to 30, you get a little bit wiser. You get to 40, now you're making way better decisions. So your physicality does change, but it's that overall what you're.
But look, it's like, for example, you and I sitting here now. I can sit here and find everything that's wrong with this moment, or I can sit down here and find everything that's right with it. And just that simple action in itself is exactly what I'm talking about, like post-traumatic growth or post-traumatic stress. One of them is going to like find everything that's wrong with this moment and brew on it. And like, I want to fight with you about the coffee's not right and this is in the wrong position.
You bought that coffee.
No, I know, I'm just giving examples. But or I can sit here and just, be like, oh, this is perfect. Like
it's
coffee's
perfect.
great.
It's perfect. We'll use that on the clip.
Yeah.
The most perfect podcast.
I know, but do you see that just that mindset, just that thing is the one thing that changes things. Now, like, I can do this for myself and for myself only, but getting other people around you to also see that is that doesn't work at all.
Well, I think the only way it works is, I don't know if osmosis is the right way, but it's these kinds of things, not that this is a massively wide-spreading podcast, but these conversations that you have, because people, I can tell people all the motivational stuff. I can tell them what they need to do to get through trauma, and then you can tell them the exact same thing, and it's way more powerful coming from you because you have done it. Do you know where am I talking from? I read it in a book. Where did I get my info from? You've done it. You've experienced it. You're living it. It's like it's a full reality of where you're at now. It's here in front of the people, speaking to them.
Yeah, because you manifest it within your psyche, like that. There's something that changes for sure in that experience. But
well, what do you see? Do you see any parallels between the version of you now and the version of you before your accident? Like, what bits of you are the same? What bits do you think are still connected?
Look, in terms of my personality is still the same. I'm still a pain in the ass, basically. But in terms of my psyche inside, it's radically different. Like, inside of myself, I'm so different to how I used to be. Because before my accident, I would almost akin it to there existed lots of subpersonalities, and just like there are for everybody. So in psychology, we have this very good example. It's a very easy example to say. So say people come to you because they want to lose weight, right? And in one moment they're coming to the gym and training, and then in the next moment they're eating a piece of cake, right? That's a subpersonality. Two parts of your psyche that are doing two different things and working towards different goals. And most of the time we don't see them and we don't acknowledge them because they're relatively benign. But when you have an accident, those subpersonalities, one is working towards your progress and the other one is working towards your detriment. And they start to become very apparent. And it's almost like you have a part of your psyche that's splintered, because that same subpersonality that was eating the piece of cake and the same subpersonality that was going to the gym, then now one is doing hydrotherapy and the other one is like, oh, I'm going to go kill myself. Do you know, they start to really splinter off into these very, very pronounced kind of elements within your system. What's interesting about that is going through the whole process of doing plant medicine and doing like sessions and doing all of this very deep mental work, is that they collapsed and came into harmony with each other. And that is the biggest difference from the me of today to the me of before. So even though physically I was in much better shape and I was a lot thinner and I was younger and like all of this other stuff, I'm a lot wiser and more cohesive as a person internally. I can like say, oh, okay, I don't want to do this, and my actions will reflect that. Whereas before I would say that I didn't want to do something, but my actions wouldn't reflect that. So I'm much more cohesive and also mindful in terms of like, I know that some people don't see it potentially, but internally within myself, the things that I do and say to other people and how I behave around people, they sit very heavily on me, and I'm very conscious and aware of those things, and I try and do my best all the time, even though it doesn't always come across that way. Whereas before I wouldn't give a shit. Like, I wasn't interested if I was doing my best. I'm like, oh, like, you don't like me? Too bad. Whereas now I'm very aware and conscious of the ramifications of how you treat people and what you do to other people. And so it sits very heavily. Unfortunately, I take it personally, which I shouldn't, but they're just some of the differences between me now and then. So even though physically I'm very different, I'm a little bit rounder and a little bit more deformed and scarred, but internally it's very different. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So then, yeah. I mean, because we spoke right at the beginning of when you were, I think you just come off a crutch, and I do kind of remember you, like, struggling with the why did this happen? Do you know, back then? And
Well, you've known me a long time, so you would have seen some of this progression.
Yeah.
Like now when I say I don't want to do something, I mean it. My actions reflect that. Whereas I'm sure before I was doing something else and saying something else. Like, I don't know. We've been good friends for a while.
yeah, no, like back, there was the initial period I remember where you were just still obviously in the darkness of it all, you know. You were very concerned about your limp. I definitely remember that. But the other stuff where it was just, I think you were just trying to find meaning. Just not enough time had passed for you to sort of give yourself the confidence that this is not going to be you forever. You are not going to be paying for.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is at the beginning I was very hung up on the physicality of it. Like I'd been someone that had grown up with, and I think this happens to a lot of women, it's our value is weighted on how we look and how thin we are and how pretty we are. And when you have all of that taken away from you and you're now in a wheelchair and you're 30 years old and you're like, oh, like how can I weigh my value if I can't walk and I look like shit and I'm scarred and deformed? Like that was a very, very deep and very real process. And I think when I met you, that's where I was at, because I couldn't walk and it's shit, basically.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you had articulated that level of detail then, but it was clear that I think you were also very much like upset at yourself for doing it to yourself. Was a big thing, and you weren't giving yourself any credit for how far you had come already in the journey at the point that we met.
Yeah, I understand that, but look, that for me was about taking responsibility, and because what I didn't want to do is blame anybody else. I didn't want to say, oh, this was your fault or that fault. It was like, this is actually really my fault. I did this. I made every choice to get myself up that wall, and I made every choice leading up to it and after. So this is totally my fault, and I still feel that way, and it's the taking responsibility for my actions.
The way you're saying it now
is different.
Is infinitely different than the way you used to say it.
Probably.
You used to say that exact type of phrase where you would be trying to convince me that behind all of that, the evaluation of you is that you're at fault. Whereas now it's like, listen, I did this. Because now you also did the next 4 years now, and now you're sitting having climbed some of the biggest mountains in the world and gone through those things, whereas at the time you hadn't had that life experience. You had no idea where the future was going, but you were still very much almost like beating yourself with it back then. Like, I did this, I deserve this, I'm trying to get out of it, but it's my fault. Whereas now it's you say the same kind of phrase with like a smile and a happiness.
Yeah, but look, I think it's like there's 5 stages of loss. I really feel like there's the same thing. When you go through some kind of trauma, you go through a process, an outlined process, and a part of it is a grief for a life that you used to have, and then figuring out who you are moving forward, and that goes through its various stages. So perhaps what you were seeing is me right in the midst of those stages.
For sure.
And unfortunately, you can't really hide them.
Yeah, you can't speed them up either.
Yeah, you can't speed them up. You can't hide them, and sometimes, unfortunately, particularly at the beginning stages, like I remember being a bit of a monster. Like I was not the best person when I was going through that whole process. I was not good to myself, and I wasn't good to the people around me. I was very fractured, and so you're like that externally.
Well, I think that does come from, like you mentioned, it's the grief for the life that you used to have. It's an interesting way to put it, It's like, and you don't know then, like you're still in the whirlpool. You're trying, you're not going down. You're managing to stay in this line, trying to get to the surface to breach and then find a new direction. And then I think you're kind of demonstrating it earlier in the podcast where you're like, you didn't want to talk about your accident. You're like, you explain it because I've talked about it enough. Like it's almost now you're talking in a sense where you've moved out of that phase, and we used to joke about it, how now you're re-abled, not disabled. And now you're very much re-abled.
Yeah. my right foot would not agree with you, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So then you've got, and then that takes us almost full circle to now. Like, what's next? What have you got happening coming up?
In the short term, I'm obviously planning to climb a lot of other mountains. And then, someone asked me a really interesting question the other day. They asked me, like, when you finish climbing all these mountains, the highest mountains that you can possibly climb, what are you going to do after this? And I was like, I'm just going to chill and be happy. Like, I think it will be the culmination of everything coming to its closure. So in the short term, I have plans to climb some very big mountains, hopefully step into the sphere of the 8,000 meter mountains. And post that, I have no idea. I'm going to, figure out what it is that feels right for me next, and probably completely change course again and keep moving in a different sphere, something that's meaningful and right and feels authentic and genuine. So who knows?
Yeah. No, I get that. That's kind of what we talked about after Everspace Camp, is come back, you've nothing in the diary, and it's like, all right, well, let's just let life wash past you and see what sticks and what direction you go in next.
Yeah, but I definitely think it's important to like have some kind of focus or direction, because what's really interesting is that time goes quickly, and the older you get, the quicker it goes. And if you don't push yourself in a particular direction, you can get lost in the weeds. Yeah,
I realized this morning, it's like 4 years since COVID.
Yeah. No way.
4 years before COVID seemed like a lifetime ago.
Oh, wow.
But 4 years since is not long.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for joining us today. Where can people follow you online and watch all your mountain videos and stuff?
I'm a very bad mountain posting video person, but on Instagram, it's caroline.d.leon.
And you have YouTube?
I do. Yes. Same thing, Caroline Leon.
Okay, cool. So check it out. And you also take people on expeditions, so they can contact you directly if that tickles their fancy.
On summitexped.com.
Cool. You can see what's on the calendar for this year.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Bye.